Hello, everyone. Good day. Welcome to the third episode of Facts for Future, where we are navigating our data, our geothermal data, also to the road to COP28, which is imminent. It's next week starting, but also, of course, beyond. This is a task for the IGA since a long time to gather, collect, and provide overviews and analysis on geothermal data, both for heating and cooling, which we had introduced by Ms. Manzella on the Wednesday webinar. And now it's over to power. And hence, I am delighted to have with me in this presentation in the coming 20-25 minutes, Mr. Luis Negrin from Mexico. Now, Luis was also our author, the main author for the World Update on Power, and presented the presentation as well in Beijing at World Geothermal Congress 23. So we are with a lot of respect, but also with curiosity, as always, to hear from him himself, the status of geothermal when it comes down to the power markets in the world. So, Luis, thank you for making the time. It is early morning for you in Mexico. So I do appreciate that you come online and that you want to share your insights. And you also prepared a wonderful presentation. So I'm almost ready to hand over. Just for those who are able to do so and want to do so, you can ask questions to Luis after his presentation. You can do so by writing in the chat. And we have some time afterwards for a nice Q&A, because I think the power markets are of interest, of course, to our worldwide audience. So thank you for that. First half an hour is listening in to Luis. Over to you, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Marit. Welcome, everyone, now online and the future participants in the recording. So I am going to talk about geothermal power, as Marit has said. And let me start by presenting the same first slide that I present in the World Geothermal Congress in last September. It is a graph that includes the installed capacity in megawatts in the left axis and the generation of power, generation of electricity in gigawatts in the right axis. Since 1980 up to now, and so in this moment we have, well, not in this moment, in December of last year, we had a little bit more than 16,000 megawatts of installed capacity in all the world. And during the last year, geothermal generated a little bit more than 96,000 gigawatts hour. The second graph I also presented in the World Geothermal Congress includes the data for capacity in megawatts and generation presented in the graph, but also I include here in parentheses the actual, the real year for which these data were collected. I mean, 1990 is the year of a Congress of the former Geothermal Resources Council, in which for first time were presented this worldwide data about capacity and generation in geothermal. 1995 is the date of the first World Geothermal Congress held in Florence, in Italy, and then the following Congress after the last Congress in this year in Beijing. But the figures that we have here are delayed 1 or 2 years with the year in which are presented. And that is one of the main reasons that explains the decision of the IGA to try to design and operate a database, a worldwide database, which have that can be updated every year or less if it is possible, no? As we will see soon. But in this moment, let me talk about the the capacity factor, which is another parameter very important for power generation, not just geothermal, but all kinds of power generation besides the capacity and the generation. Here you have the official definition of which is the capacity factor, but it's basically the relation between the actual electricity produced by one power plant of any type and the theoretical generation that the same power plant could have produced if the plant were operating all the hours of during all the year. No? So it expresses a very important parameter to assess the performance, the efficiency of a power plant. Here we have the capacity, the global capacity factor of all the thermal power plants in operation since 1990 up to 2021 or 2022 in general. Of course, this is there are a mix of several types of plants and several age, dates of commissioning of the plants and so on. But in general, it can express, it can reflect a very good data about the performance of the global geothermal generation in several years. Let me return to the database that the IGA is trying to operate now. No? This was designed one year ago by the IGA Education and Information Committee, which is chaired by Adel Mancela, and it includes not only will include not only not delayed information, but also some additional information like the type of the thermal field, the type of plant, the type of units, let's say the type of the thermal system, no? If it is hot water, two-phase, liquid dominated, vapor dominated, temperature, production, enthalpy, and so on. No? And also the type of geothermal reservoir system, no? It is the current conventional hydrothermal, it is enhanced thermal systems, closed loop, and so on. And in the case of the plants, it will include the type of the plant. You can see there, flash, there is steam, by pressure, and so on, which is the company which operates the plant, the year in which each plant was commissioned, their capacity, status, and so on. So there is a lot of information, more detail that was presented in previous years. Of course, the idea to get in more depth, in more detail about the thermal power plants, for instance, is not just a necessity to be more to have more detail. It is it tried to respond to the to know what is the what kind of power plant is in operation, because they have different efficiencies, different characteristics, and of course different costs. No? Here you have the total amount of units in operation during the last year, or 2021, 2022, presented in all the types that the IGA includes. No? I mean, the condensing or flash plants, which are the most abundant in terms of installed capacity, almost a little bit more than 9,000 megawatts. And of course, in terms of generation, dry steam, which are plants in very specific reservoirs, where only dry steam is produced, no? Including fields like Lardero, for instance, in Italy, or the geysers, the largest geothermal field in the world. No? Back pressure units, the binary organic Rankine cycle type of plants, which are the most in terms of units, and the second in terms of installed capacity and annual generation. And finally, other type of plants that include combination of flash and binary plants, and in this case, a couple of binary Kalina cycle units. Here is the average capacity factor presented by power plant type, as you can see here. No? Of course, the best capacity factor is the combination between flash and binary plants, of course, because the geothermal resource can be used in a more efficient manner. No? But behind this combination, the next is the flash type of power plants, and then binary, dry steam, and so on. No? Okay, here, well, and this is the worldwide capacity factor of all geothermal power plants. No? Here we have the top 10 countries regarding the installed capacity in this moment, and the increase in installed capacity, the net additions in this small yellow color, start in megawatts, starting with the US, Indonesia, Philippines, Turkey, New Zealand, and so on. No? And in general, the increase in installed capacity in the last 3 years, I mean, since the last World Geothermal Congress in Iceland and this Geothermal Congress in Beijing, was 847 megawatts. Of course, this represents a small increase of less than 2% each year, but that was the real situation. No? Here we have some projections that how the things could be in the next years, and for that, I am using these projections by the International Energy Agency, the IEA. Here you have the installed capacity in gigawatts, I mean thousands of megawatts, and the electric generation in terawatts hour, which are thousands of gigawatts hour. Here is the situation in 2022. From here to the past are actual data, and here are the projections. This is the current situation as we presented in this moment. I mean, our data is a little bigger in the case of installed capacity than the IEA data, and the generation is a little lower, but in general are more or less the same. Here is the projection of this agency for the year 2027 in two scenarios in the case of installed capacity, the accelerated scenario in the main case, and the prognostic for electric generation just in the main case scenario. And here is, if we use let's say the business as usual, the same rate of growth that we have in geothermal in the last 13 years, we get this installed capacity for 2027, 19.5, more or less the same that IGA, but in the case of generation is considerably lower than the creation in the main case scenario of the IEA. There are, it's not a very encouraging prognosis. I mean, but that is the situation if the things are the same. But things could be different, of course, no? And for this, I would like to contextualize this difference, presenting this graph, which is the atmospheric CO2 expressed in parts per million as of 3 or 4 days ago. Very update data, no? According with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So in this moment, we are in this part with 420.3 parts per million of CO2, very above, around 70 parts per million above the level considered safe, which is 350 parts per million, which was passed since 1990. So another next graph is another graph to contextualize the new situation that I was talking about. And in this case, we have here the increase in the global ambient temperature expressed in grade in Celsius degree above the pre-industrial levels in all the world since 1950 up to now, and the projection if the things are going to be the same more or less. No? We have here a lot ample, a wide range of models which were made or approved by the International Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations. And you can see all are well above the benchmark of 1.5 Celsius degrees, which is the limit that we can allow to increase the temperature if we want this increase be reversible in the future. So, how can we that do? How we can keep this threshold, this limit within reach? No? Well, the same International Energy Agency and its roadmap to net zero emissions says that we need to things among others. No? In the case of the energy efficiency, we need to double this amount. No? We need to improve the global energy intensity, and in the case of renewable energy, we need to triple the amount of installed capacity, passing from this 3,300 gigawatts to 11,000 gigawatts for 2030. In this part, geothermal has nothing to do, or not much to do, but in the case of global renewable energy, we have here an opportunity to increase in a rate higher than the past, because geothermal is the only base load renewable source up to now. I mean, eolic, wind energy, eolic energy, solar energy, and so on are intermittent, are variable resources, and geothermal is the only renewable up to now which is base load, which is predictable, which is dispatchable with very reliable ways. No? So For instance, I would like to present here the importance of the capacity factor that I was talking about, considering the difference between baseload and intermittent or variable generation. Here are some data taken from this another agency, the International Renewable Energy Agency, and in this paper called "Crucial Steps Towards 1.5 Celsius degrees," IRENA presents this data. No, the total installed capacity, not only geothermal, all types of generation in 21, 22 to 2022, and in 2030, the total generation in the year 2021, and the expected in 2030, global, no? And then the renewable energy total installed capacity in gigawatts in 2022, and expected for 2030, these numbers that I presented before, and the total generation in 2021, and the expected in 2030. These are the data that are included in this report. I just calculate the average capacity factor for renewable energy in recent years, which is 27%, and in 2030, which is almost the same, 28%. But if all the renewable energy were geothermal, would this capacity factor that we have of 68 have generated not 18,000 terawatt hours in 2021, but 20,000 terawatt hours. No? So we would need only 7,000 terawatt hours, which is 30% more than in this year, and not taking the total renewable energy capacity and generation. But of course, things are what they are, no? I mean, how we can get that, no? According with the same report of the IRENA. Here we have the situation in 2022 and the situation in 2030 in the same report by IRENA. Here you have the total renewable energy generation and the expected for the total installed capacity of renewable and the total installed capacity for renewable in 2022 and 2030, with divided in hydro, bioenergy, solar, photovoltaics, and so on. No? One of the big problems here is this: the percentage, the proportion, the share of variable renewable energy, which is currently 23%, and is going to increase to more than half of all the electric system in the world, to 62%. That needs a lot of backup plants for generation, or batteries or something like that, to be able to sustain this huge increase in solar and wind energy, solar photovoltaic and wind energy onshore and offshore, which will represent almost 62% of the total. No? The total renewable would be 77. It was 40% last year. It was going to be 77, but the variable energy is this amount. In the case of geothermal, here are the data. We know that it is the current, the actual, it is 16.2, not 14.6, but the the estimation of IRENA is that geothermal needs to grow 6.4 times to reach 105 gigawatts, 105,000 megawatts from the current 16.2 gigawatts. Is it possible? I would like to finish with this question. Is it possible for geothermal energy have this huge increase in the next 6 years or so on? Well, since the world geothermal potential, of course, it is possible. No? Here you have one estimation made by one estimate made by Stephenson almost 20 years ago for the world geothermal potential, considering only the hydrothermal conventional resources that we are exploring now. No? And it is 15 times more than the IRENA considered necessary by 2030. Of course, this is a general estimation, but we have some estimations about geothermal potential in several countries which have now installed capacity and are operating these geothermal plants. And these are the potential estimates only for hydrothermal resources. Yeah? You can see here in the United States, the potential is in gigawatts. I mean, thousands of megawatts, of course, for United States, Indonesia, TPA, Mexico, and so on. So we have this 90.5 gigawatts, which is very near of the 105 gigawatts established by IRENA as the target. So the geothermal potential is not an issue to get that installed capacity. No? And of course, not to mention the EGS resources, no? The enhanced geothermal resources. I just, as an example, I presented two cases that I more or less familiar in the US and Mexico. This is the potential for EGS resources in a recent report published in January of this year by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, commissioned by the Department of Energy and so on. And you have here the EGS potential of 90 gigawatts, 90,000 megawatts. Of course, concentrated in this part of the country, but also these reports estimate that the cost or the levelized cost of energy could be of 45 US dollar per megawatt by 2035, or 4.5 cents of dollar per kilowatt hour, no? Which is very competitive with the actual present cost. No? And the report considers that this goal is achievable with the technology advances that we have now. And this is the case of Mexico, whose estimation is 46 gigawatts, with resources at 327 kilometers depth. So only with the resources, EGS resources of these two countries, will have more than the total that IRENA consider as the goal. No? But of course, this type of resources needs much more time than 2030. So the problem is a problem of investments, basically. Here we have the estimation of this report, also published this year. Here you have, these are trillion of US dollar per year. I mean, millions, no? Of US dollar And this is the current situation, the actual situation from 2011 to 2022, divided in private and public financing, not just for geothermal, of course, but all renewables. And here is the estimate that the IRENA in the same report considered for geothermal, $409 billion in order to get this 105 gigawatts of installed capacity in 2030. So this is a tiny fraction of all the necessary, the investment necessary to get this to achieve not more than 1.5 Celsius degrees of increase in global temperature. No? Of course, we finance is not the only thing. No? Of course, we need more qualified personnel. We need more drilling rigs. We need more pipes, casings, power plants, of course, which are very which are not very probable that can be constructed, even if we have the resources that can be built in 6 years. No? You need to take in account that a greenfield geothermal project, I mean, starting from scratch to generation takes a minimum of 5 years. No? But if we can all the financial and technical resources available, yes, it would be possible in the next 6 years achieve this 105 gigawatts of installed capacity for geothermal. So I think that's it, my presentation.
So first of all, Luis, thank you. This was very comprehensive, and also it clearly shows that not only you put this in perspective of the geothermal community in terms of how much installed capacity we currently have, it also fits a bigger picture, and that is where do we want to go to 2030 and beyond. And the amount of investment needs is, of course, striking. I mean, and as you said, it's not just for geothermal, it's for all the renewable technologies, but that is, it is striking. For those of you in the room, you may ask your questions. If you want by chat, you can write it down, but you can also, as Gregor wrote in the chat as well, if you want to raise your hand and maybe ask directly, we unmute the microphone. This is possible. We are not with so many people, so we can do that. But in case you do not have a question, I have many up my sleeve, so so don't worry. But I like to see if there is anything from the audience. Not immediately, so maybe that will come later. So I think, Luis, look, part of the discussion I like to have is indeed about collecting data, and then maybe we move over to the targets that we all have to achieve, and how you see that being the one who is collecting all this data all over the world with all your fellow authors. Collecting data, maybe explain a little bit how that works, and also the database that we have, and the amount of data that is stored in there, but also for you as you are our main author for the World Updates. How did that process go? And maybe also in the run-up to Calgary 26, is there anything that we can do better in your opinion? Oh, Luis, you are on mute.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
The way that I collected data for this World Geothermal Congress was the same in the past Congress. We designed or asked from people in each country to collect the data. We send the tables and wait that they can do that. No? Of course, this is a project this is a process very very difficult, you know. I mean, because maybe the person that we address, we ask in some countries, not the current person, and so on. No? So the idea, as far as I understand now, is to have these persons, these ambassadors, as they are called in each country, which can not only collect, but also upload every time that they know that a new power plant was commissioned in their country, you know, in some geothermal field and so on, they can upload the main initial data of this new power plant. You know? Of course, there will not be data about generation, but in the next year, it's only necessary to collect the generation during the year and so on, the main characteristics of the plant, the type, the capacity, the manufacturer, and so on, we will be there. No? So this is the best idea, I think, and of course, a similar process for heat and cooling, even if the persons are different, no? Because maybe the specialist in heat and cooling is different, but in some countries could be the same because there is no, for instance, there is no power plants and so on. No? So I think that this database that has been working by Gregor specifically, no? Is going to be a very important improvement in the way we have been worked in the past 30 or 40 years.
Yeah. Yes. And look, I have started to take, let's say, the following position as well, is that without that thorough analysis of our data that we have worldwide, both in heating and cooling and electricity, of course, we actually do not really know where we stand, right? So the stock take in terms of where we stand, what we have, how to report on that, and also the definitions surrounding it is, of course, a phenomenal thing. And I think as IGA, we are doing already quite some years, of course, some work on this, but I think it is even more important in the coming decades, where we will see, left or right, we will see further investment going into geothermal. And hence, the way we communicate and promote, but also are backed up by relevant data in a consistent way is, in our opinion, at least crucial. Do you share that perspective? Oh, sorry, Luis, again, you're on mute.
Of course, yeah, I agree with that, no? With that situation, because you see, I agree also that the collection, the gathering of data for heat and cooling is very more complex and difficult that in the case of power, but of course, even in power, they are several hurdles. No? I mean, the information is not only the store capacity in megawatts and the generation in gigawatts or whatever, but also a lot of things about the geothermal reservoir, about the characteristics, temperature, enthalpy, production of steam, type of, I mean, all of this kind of information is very valuable, and in this moment we don't have any. I mean, we can go to the official energy ministries, the DOE, or the Information Energy Agency in the US, or the Energy Ministry in Mexico, and so on. But of course, they have general data, no? And regarding specifically capacity and generation, and that start in this case start the problems defining which is installed capacity, which is gross capacity, net capacity, the capacity that the plant requires for self-consumption and so on. No? Because every every agency, every ministry has their own definition. In the case of the idea of this database, would be the same criteria.
Yeah. Well, and this is a very important point that also Ian, thanks as always, Ian, for being part of this webinar, and now also posing a very good question in the chat, where Ian says, and I couldn't agree more. Ian says that a lot of the data is currently, and let's say it's not just data, it's also information pertaining to geothermal energy, including the technical topics, but also the policies and hence the, let's say, the regulatory information. It's all being either addressed by the relative members, or by the national members, or by certain groups at the member, well, at an affiliated member level, maybe even. And only in certain cases it's harmonized by IGA, for instance, in a regional context, or maybe in certain papers that we are writing and presenting at our events. Ian, if I do take your question the right way, hopefully, otherwise you will raise your hand, I bet. But how can we do this better? I mean, we have now a system, we have a database, we write papers, we have events, we have workshops, we do webinars. That's all very lovely, and I think it is very important. But here we have Ian, and Ian says, how can we harmonize this in a better way than we currently have? And I guess the discussion should then be about not just offering this and people can download, because I think that is an easy way that we are already working on, but maybe also some fact sheets I was thinking of, or maybe some reports dedicated to specific regions. This is also something that I would be very interested in, especially now with our sort of revised strategy on how we are targeting the different regions globally, and how we can help facilitate this. So maybe indeed in a structured way, looking at specific regions and then looking at all the data that we already have, what's missing, what are the gaps, and then trying to fill that with either, yeah, some further data filling, but also maybe the conversations that need to be happening. Luis, what do you think? If I pose all these questions, but also have some ideas on the answer, what is your perspective?
Yeah, of course, the geothermal database can't include all of these other policies, situations, and so on. No? I think the best way is try to publish dedicated papers about these specific facts. No? For instance, one very important issue is very important topic is the regulatory situation in each country. No? In my opinion, the existence of a specific geothermal law has been very important to develop to make possible the development of geothermal energy. Of course, there are countries like the US that lacks of a specific geothermal law and have been very successful in developing their geothermal resources. But in other cases like Turkey, you know, the existence of this specific law is very important, no? And also the existence of specific policies to stimulate the investment in geothermal, no? Not only feed-in tariffs or exemptions of taxes and so on, but also the possibility of that the government, through the ministry, the energy ministry, or another specific agencies, could start the development of new geothermal zones. Maybe reach up to the drilling of the first exploration wells, and then make a bid for the geothermal field, which is that Turkey has been done, and with very successful results. No? So maybe trying to produce these dedicated papers about this subject would be a very good complement of the geothermal database.
Yes, excellent, excellent. And I'm happy that we are recording all of this, because this is very important information, what you are just expressing here. And we have another question, which is a very nice one. Takela, thank you very much for posing the question around the UN geothermal let's say, the UNFC, the framework classification for geothermal resources, and its guidelines that the IGA is working on already years, is a system of classification, and hopefully one day when also solar and wind and hydropower and all the others are doing the same thing, we have a way of comparing, and we have a way of comparing our reserves, our resources, our feasibility, our economics, but also where do we stand when it comes down to investment levels. So this is a big endeavor, and as IGA we are very proud members of the UN and observers of the UN EC doing all this work. So this is a great question. How can that help? How can that system help harmonizing data? Now, Luis, maybe first to you, are you very familiar already with the UNFC, or do you want me to get a first go on this question?
Well, I am not very familiar, but I know the work of Graham Bermond and Giorgia Falcone about this system, and I am positive, I am sure that having all of this data in our database would facilitate a lot the work of this committee. No? Of course, they are focusing on different aspects of the thermal resource, but I have no doubt that it will be also useful for them and for our specific committee of the IGA.
Yeah. Yes. So I have a couple of thoughts on this one. One is, first of all, I think we should do a better job in explaining what the UNFC is. So that is on the list of webinars and, let's say, a series of explanations around the work that the IGA is doing on the standardization and the best practices, let's say, exercises. So the UNFC is not known to a lot of people, not even within our own membership. So that is one thing. Second thing, although I am not an expert in the UNFC, I still find it it's a very